Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Elizabeth Calder. I'm the CIO of Home Equity Bank and your moderator for today's webinar, which is called Revolutionizing Digital Loan Applications. Here's the agenda for today. We'll start off with some housekeeping notes, introductions of our guest speakers, a presentation, and a Q&A session. And we'll finish with the evaluation form. We've got great content for you today, but let's start with the housekeeping. We encourage you to submit any questions you have through the Q&A box on your screen. We'll make every effort to finish on time, so please stick around to get the full benefit. And watch for a thank you email from us, which will contain the download link to this presentation. You should receive that email by the end of the week. Also, as a thank you for attending today and for completing the evaluation form, we'll send you a $5 coffee card. Please take a moment to complete the evaluation form. We do need your feedback to design better quality programs. Now on to the program. Revolutionizing Digital Loan Applications, a case study. Joining me today for this in-depth conversation are my special guests, Sam Bacon, Senior Product Marketing Manager from OneSpan, and George Oliveira, Director of IT Solutions Delivery at the Business Development Bank of Canada, or BDC. Welcome, Sam and George.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Great, thanks. Good to be here.
To tell you a little bit about our two guests, Sam Bacon is a Senior Product Manager with OneSpan, bringing nearly 10 years of experience in information security. Prior to joining OneSpan, Sam managed content strategy at mobile app security provider Now Secure. Previously, Sam led go-to-market strategy for a portfolio of vulnerability management and security testing products and services from TrustWave Spider Labs. He also served as an editor-in-chief for the annual TrustWave Global Security Report. Welcome, Sam. George has over 16 years of experience and has worked at several large enterprises in the course of his career. He's been at BDC for the last 9 years, where he played several roles. Notably, he was leading the mobile delivery team for the last 3 years. Well, that team received several national and international recognition awards. He's currently a Director of Development Practices at BDC and is responsible for BDC's IT transformation project. Welcome, George. I'll start with a question for Sam. Sam, I'm really looking forward to hearing about how BDC leveraged OneSpan's solution to transform their loan application process. But maybe we could start with you getting us oriented on the broader industry issues that you focus on.
Great. Just a quick intro here. At OneSpan, we help financial institutions deliver secure digital journeys and fight fraud. So one of the biggest challenges today as organizations kind of move to fully digital process is that balance between user experience and then risk and security as well. It's not a trade-off, though, between security and customer experience, but what the challenge is how do you deliver both to offer both an experience with the necessary security safeguards while also ensuring that frictionless digital experience. And as George will explain, the BDC experience and all that great work they did there is really a great example of this. So looking forward to it.
Great. Let's get into that then.
So we'll be talking about probably one of the most exciting projects I've done in my career that I'm really proud of being a part of. Right before getting into the nitty-gritty, I'd just like to talk a little bit about BDC, just to make sure that everyone knows about it. We're celebrating our 75th birthday last Monday. There's all sorts of different celebrations that happen on our side, but just for those of you who are not aware about what BDC is, I'm just going to go over that real quick before getting into the story. That will help you just set the context of why this project was such a success and how come it helped us in achieving most of our objectives. One of the first things I'd like to say is BDC is the only bank that's devoted exclusively to entrepreneurs. So we do not do personal lending, but we do help entrepreneurs in all sorts of different ways. We're also a certified B Corp, the first Canadian financial institution to actually receive a B Corp, which means that we're not only focusing on making profits, but mostly in helping the society as a whole. So I think this is we're very proud to hold that title and the certification. But also in our scenario, we do not compete directly with different charter banks. So we do have a mandate that we have to sort of try to innovate and how we do things and do things differently to be complementary to whatever like a complete basically they're offering. So not only we offer very flexible financing, but also a lot of advisory services. we connect entrepreneurs with any experts that they need at the moment. But we also do a lot of investment in smart capital, including like venture capital, for instance. We are, just to give you an idea of size, we have approximately 60,000 active clients, plus several more that we've helped in the past. We have over 120 business centers all over Canada with about 2,300 employees. But to count consultants, we go above 4,000. And our client satisfaction is it's above 94%, which is something that we really, really care about. So this is a little bit of what BDC is.
That's great. Thank you. That's really good context for the case study. Maybe we could talk about the problem you were trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that is particular about PDC is the fact that our account managers are very, 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 very often on the road. So what happens is basically every time they need to do loans, they would bring a lot of paperwork, be able to give it to the client so that they can bring it back to the office. And then they would get more. Let's say he's out of a form, he's got to get back, all of those things. So that was a little bit of a problem for us. The fact that we obliged him to actually carry paper with him wasn't necessarily the best thing. We've been trying to modernize our applications. And for instance, we only have electronic documentations, but the entry point of those electronic documentation, it's basically paper. So you start out with paper, then you scan it, and then from then on. So we thought that was sort of a problem. And it was even worse when we decided to push a little bit our systems and try to do sort of different ways of helping entrepreneurs. So our credit team would do an assessment of all of our clients and see which ones they would like to offer a pre-approved loan so they could benefit from expediting, let's say, the whole process. So when you started to do that, like I said, like the team would manually go over all the paperwork, see which clients and how much they would like to give to each client. That was a colossal task, but it brought some results to BDC. So when we've done the campaign before 2016, started out in 2015, just to give you perspective, a loan at BDC would usually take between 14 and 16 days, I'd say. When we did this pre-authorization campaign, we got some benefits out of it. First of all, we had a closing rate of about a little under 10%. And 75% of the loans took 9 days or plus, but we still had 25 that were pretty fast. That was already a gain for most of the entrepreneurs that needed money fast. Also, out of about 70% of them took about 5 touch points with the client, either by phone or an actual visit, at least 2 visits to close them, which is somewhat better than just going back to the office and getting paper and putting it back. That being said, there were still some inefficiencies that we'd like to take care of. So one of the things that we've decided to do at this point was that, you know what, we might be able to do something better here. So we started discussing giving them tools for them to work on the road. So we offered about 40 iPads to them without any app necessarily, but at least the documents could be brought out through with an iPad. They came up with extremely good feedback about them. So we saw there's an opportunity to improve right there. And that's when it came up with an application, which you can see right there. And I'm going to tell you a few things. It wasn't very pretty. We have a lot of good things about this app that I can say, but we haven't invested much into making it the best app possible. We just wanted to try this concept and seeing if that was something that would work. When we did the app, we were surprised by the results. We only gave it to about 40 account managers. We gave iPads and other devices similar, and we wanted to test it out a few concepts. So we gave that app that you see right there. That basically didn't change anything in the process, but just basically you would be able to do it at the client side without necessarily touching to a pen and paper. The results was like, instead of 9.3% closure, we had 25 for those 40 account managers. Instead of taking the 75% with the 9 days or plus, 40% took a max 2 days, some of them in the same day. And also 60% of them were done with a single visit. So after one single visit, we were able to close it all. That application was made to be used only once, so sort of this pilot, but we saw it going very well. And, although we haven't built it for that, the executives were saying, okay, this is probably one of the best ways we've found to help entrepreneurs into financing, accelerating it that much. I think we should use it again. So we ended up actually using it for the next 3 campaigns. Although all the things that we were saying, like the app wasn't pretty, usability aspect that could have been looked at, the users loved it. So I have some feedbacks here of some users and some clients, just to show you an example. The first blue one was from a client that says the experience was awesome, 10s across the board. Couldn't have asked for an easier app to make this loans work. So we have all of these comments. One of the things that I haven't mentioned is that basically we integrated a way to sign documents in the application. It was an in-house solution. And the idea again is just to see if there would be appetite for more. And we were trying to limit some of the things we couldn't necessarily prove fully non-repudiation of the document. So we were just doing loans under $100,000. And the idea to basically just get started with that. And then if there was a loss, you wouldn't necessarily be of a bigger loan. But again, like I said, the clients and the account managers' feedback was pretty stunning. So this is what drove us to, want more.
That's great. So then what else did you do after that?
Basically, right after that, one of the first things we decided to do was to, just talk to account managers. Okay, there was this one opportunity that we pursued. Are there other things that we can do with mobility at BDC? That's when we started a very, very interesting journey with a lot of partnerships, and that we try to do things in the best way. So we ended up doing a tour in Canada. We got about 40 people from all over the country, and we ended up coming up with an idea for a few different apps that we said, those apps could definitely benefit our account managers. And this is a list of some of them. We prioritized some of those. There's about 6 to 8 applications that have been prioritized. And that would include, so the pilot was done, everything was successfully, but, we could add them into, let's say, showing them KPIs about the businesses, comparing them with other businesses that are similar, being able to sell consulting mandates for them, and all sorts of different things, including another one to improve this whole process and make it a more, let's say, automated process instead of just this one. So we worked out with Apple. Apple helped us a lot in the beginning. And we had workshops with them. We brainstormed with a lot of those things. They helped us out quite nicely. One of the reasons why we chose them, like I was saying, is we didn't want to compromise on the security. We wouldn't have 100 different shots at this. We had this one, right? It was a big investment that we're trying to do. When we said, okay, let's buy 1,000 iPads, it's not necessarily like a small investment. So we decided to actually make sure that we do things properly. So we try to implicate all the departments that had to be implicated. We try to build a solid foundation for the applications, and we use the concept that Apple was pushing us towards, which is developing single-purpose applications that are user-centric, no compromise on security, no compromise on infrastructure. So that's what we ended up doing right after that.
I'm curious to know how long it took and how expensive it was to deliver all of this.
So one of the things that we've tried to do at BDC, and I think that's sort of what helped me, get more awareness from my current position where I'm actually leading a key transformation, agile transformation, let's say, within the organization, was the fact that we didn't know in the beginning. So we didn't know where we're getting into. So we started out with different approaches. We're being very iterative. We're going to talk a little bit about the processes a little more in the next few slides, but all sorts of different applications. Each of those would take between 3 to 4 months, let's say, to have a stable version that would continue to operate and add features to. So you see all sorts of different ones, including one that's called scoring repeat business loans. That's probably one I wanted to talk to you about a little more. So this is what it looked like. This is one app. That's the one that's been, gaining prizes, and we're very proud of, and they've made a huge difference, for our account managers, but mostly for our clients. This is one that I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about. So that application specifically was developed from, I'd say, from the month of March until September 2016. So it wasn't much longer than the others, but it brought an immense amount of value. A lot of different things discussed about that was basically, how do we challenge our current processes? How can we just, instead of just giving to them any sort of application that, just mimics the current process, but in a more efficient way, why don't we give them the best possible version of doing the loan? And that's what we decided to do. So a lot of the things were put in place. And again, with the security in mind all the time. So first of all, we established VPNs on our computers just to make sure that all the communication, all the data that goes into the device goes in a secured way. We also started out with, we created SSO profiles, and we attached each one of the profiles to one device. So basically, an account manager couldn't lend his iPad to a colleague. Every account manager had their own iPad. We made sure that basically they had to do the thumbprint in order to unlock the device and even to authorize loans. So no one could just get his iPad and do it. So he would have to be putting a thumbprint now and then. We also included a lot of like a security aspects in the sense of like we've done SaaS and deaths, and we've done a big penetration test towards the end before putting it to the public. So all of those efforts were actually thought out to make sure this application, it's not only user friendly, but it's extremely solid in what it offers to account managers and entrepreneurs. We ended up going a little further with that application, and we were able to do loans up to $750,000, and that increased in volume for BDC. So we needed a solid solution to back us up on the signature there, because now we're talking about increasing the volume of loans that we were doing with it and increasing the amount of each one of them. So that's when we partnered with OneSpan, and from the beginning we've done an RFP. We had different vendors that were in, and there were a lot of reasons why we ended up choosing OneSpan. But the fact that they came in the RFP and they already had an integration with the BDC logo on them, we couldn't even say it wasn't an in-house solution. It was a robust and very, very easy to use and easy to integrate solution, and that just sold us right there.
What kind of results have you had, George?
There was all sorts of different results. One of the things that happened was they discovered this new way of doing transactions, which was the remote transactions. And it ended up giving us, as of June 2019, about $470 million in loan value that was authorized, over 4,000 transactions, and 98% of them were signed electronically. So that's about like 26,000 hours of manual work that was saved. So we were pretty happy about that.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you then drive adoption to get to the levels that you got to?
We've done actually a very, very large campaign, because we could have done the best application in the world, but if people are not using it, then definitely it's not going to have any impact on the entrepreneurs. So one of the things that we've done is we came up with a campaign to ask them to tell them their stories. How are you using it? How are entrepreneurs finding it? Give some concrete examples about that. And basically, we were awarding 5, if I'm not mistaken, Apple Watches to the ones that had the most shares or likes in our internal Yammer, like a sort of a Facebook for enterprises. So it worked pretty well. We had several submissions, and we ended up actually hearing very, very nice stories about the client, and sometimes us in the head office we have lost contact with. Also, we made sure that account managers had performance objectives that were related to doing Express Loans. And Express Loan is the name of the application that we gave to the application. That was another one of them. And we ended up within the first 2.5 months getting a 96% adoption rate.
That's absolutely amazing. And how did that help with your vision?
Our goal is to help entrepreneurs. It's not just the fact that we're driving the numbers, and we were driving numbers, but the thing is hearing the stories of like how entrepreneurs could basically come and be benefited by that, having a real change in their lives. I can share you a couple of the stories that were shared in that campaign that I think it's worth mentioning. One of them basically from a lady from the west of Canada. She was about to retire. She was living in a very remote city. There was no BDC offices in that small city, but her 2 kids were the ones taking care of the organization. So I think she was in late 80s or late 90s. I'm not sure. And what happened was she wasn't necessarily someone that was very much tech savvy. So what happened is like once the son and the daughter of this lady came into the BDC office. We've done the loan with them completely. And but she would still legally be owner of the organization, so she would have to sign. So normally, what would happen is we would have given the document to her, or the account manager would have to go all the way up, and then everything would have been signed, and then things will get back, and eventually they will get the money within let's say about 2 weeks time. So in this scenario, we've done the loan at a distance, and she was able to sign remotely from the comfort of her home. And what was good about this is the letter that she wrote right after. In the letter, she mentioned a few things, and thanking BDC for everything else. One of the things that she thanked us for was the fact that I was coming out of the business, the fact that you allowed me to come in, sign this, and it was so easy that I could do it by myself without any help, made me just feel relevant again. Not because I'm a little older that I cannot participate into this technology. It was actually so easy that I could do it without any help. So I feel relevant and feel very happy about that. So that was one story. There was even another one that's a very short one, where a company was about to go out of business. They literally made this discussion, and there was a meeting that was already scheduled with this account manager. And the guy said, while they were in the meeting right there, he said, "By the way, I can offer you a loan." So, well, yeah, but I have to do this huge payment I won't be able to make it. I don't think I can do anything. There was a textile company. And then basically they just said, what if I can tell you can have your money by tomorrow morning? This was in the afternoon. And I said, well, then we might have a chance there. And that's what ended up happening. We've done this loan. And again, he wrote a letter just thanking BDC for how fast we could have done that. And I think this is what, this is where BDC is all about. This is like about helping the entrepreneurs and making sure that they get timely help, not only help, but basically when they need it. So this just makes us very proud and happy about what we've done there.
Well, that's amazing, both of those stories. So what's next for your work with OneSpan?
After Express Loan, we've already done Quick Proposal, which helped us, and that's the second mobile application. That application is one basically that helps account managers start selling consulting mandates or advisory services, and that's already in production and it's actually working pretty well. We've done right after that integrated that with our portal, so now clients can also get loans from the internet by themselves without necessarily having an account manager with them, which is also something that's been tremendously successful at BDC. And we also have all sorts of future apps, like an app for testing the KYC or know your client or onboarding, let's say, new clients at BDC. There's another app that we're working for the clients themselves. So all of those things are actually coming. So I think the partnership it's far from being over, and we're working very well together. And I think it was a great experience so far.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. The BDC use case really shows internal employees being more productive and delivering a great experience for prospects and customers. So maybe I can go back to Sam from OneSpan now. Sam, can you talk a little bit about what else consumers are looking for in their mobile financial services?
Thanks, Elizabeth. After that great story of how mobile really improved the user experience for BDC employees and BDC customers alike, I just want to talk a little bit about this survey of 17,000 consumers. We're talking about consumers in this slide here, conducted by Deloitte about what features would really compel them to make more use of their mobile apps. George was talking about the importance of adoption of that great app as well. So here's the thing, more than half of respondents, so 52% right there in the top left corner of that chart, said that stronger data security was really important to them. And the results also show us the importance of balancing user experience and security. 41% of users are looking for easier login and authentication processes. George, again, kind of mentioned some of that with the fingerprint biometric used to log in and do some approval of loans. And so I think that really what this data kind of boils down to in terms of what consumers are looking for in mobile financial service experiences is making it easier to get things done with the app, really. And, George definitely provided a number of examples of how BDC really focused on speeding up these processes and making them simpler for everybody.
That's a lot to address. So what do you think it is that makes security so much of a concern for mobile app users?
I'm glad you asked, Elizabeth. I think it's that really, criminals and fraudsters and malicious actors, whatever you kind of want to call them, they're people looking to take advantage of consumers and their bank accounts are really kind of shifting their focus to the mobile channel. Here's just kind of a few stats here as proof points to that, I suppose. Mobile banking Trojans, it's malware on mobile devices that tries to steal users' credentials and steal money in a lot of cases as well through mobile banking apps, actually increased 9 times from 2017 to 2018, according to Kaspersky Labs, who tracks a number of examples of malware. And then Verizon recently put out a mobile security index report, which quoted data saying that mobile users are actually 3 times more likely to click on phishing links on their mobile phone versus on their desktop. And then finally, Javelin Strategy also, that's an analyst firm, they also reported that mobile phone account takeovers doubled in 2018 versus 2017. And really what my point is here is that if more people are falling victim to these attacks, more people are talking about them, more of them are making it into the media, consumers are they're more aware of these issues and they really want to build a relationship with an institution that they feel has their back and is securing their data, securing that mobile app that they're using day to day and that sort of thing. So I think that's where it's coming from.
Wow, those numbers are really a big jump. So what's driving that exposure? Why is it going up so much?
One thing that banks and really any company that develops applications is struggling with is, developers are under tremendous pressure to release more features more quickly. And sometimes I think BDC is obviously on the savvier side of this in terms of what George was talking about inserting security into the software development lifecycle. But sometimes security gets left behind because, again, new features more quickly. These two charts here are from an annual DevSecOps survey. So that's surveys of developers and operations, IT staff, those teams involved in deploying applications. On the left, you see that nearly half of organizations are releasing app updates multiple times a week, which is crazy. It's not crazy, it's incredible compared to just where we were 5 or 10 years ago. Just that release frequency is really increasing quickly, and that can be a competitive differentiator and that sort of thing. And then on the right, app developers themselves are saying, yes, security is important. We realize that, but just about half of them, and that figure has held constant for the past 3 years or so. They say it's important, but they just don't have enough time to spend on it. There, again, pressure is more features more quickly, and security just doesn't necessarily always get the time it deserves. And that's the thing too, is that sort of the skill set for mobile application security specifically, it's just not quite there. I think we're getting better, but even if developers had the time, it's possible that they don't have the tools or the training or the expertise that's necessary to make sure that they do it correctly. So just really quickly on that point, this is a study from 2018 that found that 75% of the Android apps that they studied, they studied almost 2 million Android apps, they found that they were not obfuscated. So what obfuscation means, or what obfuscating an app means, is that you're applying technology or techniques to make your app hard for somebody to understand, so that the app will work on an Android device, for example. You can publish that to the world, but if someone had some malicious intent and really wanted to pick that app apart and crack it, obfuscation makes that harder for them to do. And what's also interesting here is Android Studio itself. That's kind of the official free tool for developing Android apps that, Android Studio provided by Google. It includes a free obfuscation tool within it. But this study actually found that even developers that thought they had obfuscated their app hadn't actually done it correctly. As a part of the study, they brought in 70 developers sort of into a lab, and 78% of them really couldn't complete a realistic obfuscation task.
I didn't even know what obfuscation was in an application context, so that's really interesting. Gosh, can you explain, maybe just for the people listening, a little bit more what best practices would look like? Like, what did BDC do?
George talked about a number of things, some of them being on this slide as well. I kind of look at mobile app security best practices from sort of an internal and an external perspective. Put another way, what you can control internally and what you can't control externally. George mentioned that the specific app for the loan approval was something that was deployed to manage devices. They got these iPads and they really hardened those, very smart stuff there. But when you go more into a business to consumer sort of model, you have less control there. And we'll get to that in a second. But here's the deal. From an internal perspective, you really need to harden the app by addressing any potential vulnerabilities and making sure that you're applying best practices when it comes to secure development. And for that, I really highly recommend OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security organization, and they just make a whole bunch of materials available for free. They provide a mobile app security testing checklist and a mobile app security verification standard that you can kind of use as you begin your project, or start to institute some better mobile app security best practices. And they offer a guide to kind of testing the app against that standard. And as George mentioned, they were doing static application security testing of the app, and then also dynamic application security testing throughout the development lifecycle, right? It didn't just come at the end, it was happening throughout. So that's definitely a more efficient way to go about doing things. And again, George, as he said, what was critical is that security was really prioritized at the start. They took a deep look at the authentication methods they were using. And like I said, they were doing that testing throughout the process. Recommendations, very high level, is really take those checklist items, make them a part of the product requirements, give your developers the tools they need to implement those security controls, train your developers on secure coding. And again, as George explained, just really make sure you're going through the security testing throughout that life cycle, getting some hard, sort of in-depth penetration testing happening at the end of those cycles as well.
So is it really all about those kind of internal controls that you develop into the app?
Well, it's definitely a start for sure. And again, in terms of George's use case, they managed the devices to which their app was deployed, which gives you another sort of layer of security there. But that's different than, again, when you are publishing an app to the app stores, whether that's Google Play or the Apple App Store, right? Because in most cases, when you publish a mobile app for public consumption, you really lose control of where that app is going. As a user installing it on an insecure device, is an attacker taking the app and trying to crack it to find weaknesses in it? It's really best to operate under the assumption that, yes, your app will be installed on devices that put the app at risk. Luckily, there is advanced mobile app security technology, what's referred to as in-app protection. There's also what's called app shielding or runtime application self-protection that can, in most cases, really easily be added to an app so that you have some visibility into the environment in which that app is running. And as a result, detect and kind of shut the app down if there's any sort of tampering activities going on, or also detecting if there's malware on the device that's actually trying to take advantage of an app. It can also detect that and again shut the app down to stop that from happening. And just to kind of reiterate, OneSpan provides app shielding, and one thing that a lot of customers appreciate about that is the app can actually run, but also kind of protect itself even on a rooted or jailbroken device, which just means that it's a device that people kind of customize to, and as a result of that, they kind of deactivate some pretty key security controls on the device. But with app shielding, you can still have those apps on those types of devices, and they're still, in most cases, protected from a large amount of potential malicious activities there.
That's a lot to think about. So if you wanted to give the people listening sort of a strategy that's a simple framework, how would you suggest they organize their thoughts?
So just to kind of wrap up really quick, I guess what I'd like people to kind of take away from my section of this content here is mobile threats are increasing. There's more mobile malware out there than there ever has been. Fraudsters are turning more of their attention to the mobile channel. So we got to be thinking a little bit more about mobile app security. But the situation is not hopeless. I'm not trying to put that out there. It's just time to make sure you're really being proactive about protecting your mobile apps. And then, of course, by extension, your users. As we talked about in that Deloitte study, users are really expecting this. So you got to deliver on that as well. And then also protect your organization from fraud. Secondly, depending on the platforms alone, neither Android or iOS will ever be 100% secure. I don't know if any of you on the line have looked at the news lately in that arena, but there's vulnerabilities and kind of exploits and stuff. Last month was quite ripe with many of those sorts of incidents going on. So, remember, malicious apps are distributed via the Google Play Store. Over the past month, again, we've seen a number of headlines also about security issues in iOS specifically. So due diligence really requires that you go beyond simply saying, well, Apple or Google and Android or iOS will protect our app. You really need to make your app kind of a secure island in those potentially hostile environments. And then finally, this is sort of a reiteration, but you don't have control over your users' devices in a lot of cases. George's case is different. Again, managed devices provided by BDC, so they can harden those and lock those down a bit more. But you're deploying your app to untrusted environments, and you really need to also think about giving your developers the tools they need to make sure that the app is secure and kind of take action to protect your mobile app in those environments that you don't have visibility into necessarily. So I guess that's kind of how I'd wrap my section here.
Sam and George as well. I've learned so much. So I think we have the ability now to open it up. It's being open. I see we have a few questions from people on the webinar. So just a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions, if you go to the Q&A box, you can submit them. And in the meantime, I will jump on in with a couple of questions that we've already received here. So the first question that I have is for George. Were applicants able to put in like all their personal information, social security number, age, address, all that?
So actually, like Sam was saying, the application was only available to our account managers, and one way of speeding things up is basically the application was only available for existing clients. So basically, that information existed in our systems, but we didn't have to use the mobile device. We wouldn't have to enter any of that information through the device itself. So everything was already on our back end. So
yeah, you actually could pull the data from your core systems.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. Second question, did you give them the authority to do that for any loan amount, or did the mobile app have kind of thresholds?
Yeah, he had. Like I mentioned before, we could go up until $750,000 loans. That's still a pretty big amount, but it wasn't unlimited.
But that's an internal risk limit that was set, not any limitation anywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So the third question that I have online, it has to do with when you pull the financial information in. Could you do that at the same time as the account manager was taking the application, or did they have to take the application and then it went away somewhere and picked up all that information in the background?
We try to build it in a more iterative way. So let's say some of the things that we thought would be a good idea wasn't necessarily done at the time. We're still working on them, such as basically we'd like to notify account managers when a client becomes eligible to those loans. But whenever the account manager picked up their device, they could immediately figure out there if there wasn't a pre-approved amount for one specific client, and that would come up right away. So we've done sort of an engine that would be able to respond to him immediately.
The next question I have, what would you recommend, and I guess this question is probably if you each wanted to offer your suggestions, if somebody doesn't have any mobile apps out there in their workforce at all, what would you recommend, or with their clients, what would you recommend for somebody in the IT organization or in the business organization who wants to start into that journey? Maybe George, if you want to start, and then Sam will get your thoughts too.
One of the things is obviously our biggest experience was with applications for own account managers to basically accelerate and give them, let's say, more flexibility in their offering to the client. And one of the things that worked very well for us is definitely doing a pilot. Just start small, just get feedback all the time, just see if there's a business case for you there. Another thing that I think is extremely important is the fact that involving everyone around the organization. Make sure that your legal department knows about it. Make sure that your security department knows about it. Make sure that everyone knows what we're doing, and just do that with their help. I think collaboration in this sense and starting small would be my two biggest advice.
Cool. Sam?
I mean, if we're talking origination stage here, I think just to expand maybe a little on what George said is just make sure that it's helping achieve business objectives, right? What can you do to help improve the bottom line by making employees more efficient in some way, shape, or form? Really kind of focus in on what that might be and define it clearly, because you got to be careful of scope creep. But again, just remember it's not just a tech play. It's not just a security play, it's a business play. As George said, you got to get all these stakeholders involved so that everybody is involved and excited about it as well. But yeah, I think at the origination stage, that's kind of what I'd recommend.
And what are the key things that would make that project a success? George, if you thought about the 3 or 4 things that you did that really made a difference, what were they?
I think one of them, like I said, is making sure everyone is involved. Like if everyone feels part of this, then they will definitely help you out. And, this collaboration will definitely drive success. One other thing that I'd say is there are different considerations. So make sure that, like already previously mentioned, start small. Don't try to boil the plant like the world with the first version of the application. Start with the sort of an MVP, a minimum viable product. Just get this in the hands of the users and make sure that they use that. And I'm sure you're going to get extremely good feedback that you wouldn't get it otherwise. So just using agile practices would definitely be another big advice that I would give.
If you and maybe this is a question for Sam, talk a little bit about some of your customer experiences. Like how long does it take from, yay, we've got a business case, we want to do this, to getting something new out in a fairly straightforward experience?
That varies a lot. I feel like that's probably a better question for George. But what I can speak to is OneSpan offers what's called the Mobile Security Suite, and what that is it's a collection of SDKs, software development kits, that really make implementing security controls easier, and then also things like facial recognition authentication, secure communication, implementing push notifications so that you get sort of an alert on your phone that you can then approve or deny to get logged in, for example, to the mobile app or maybe to the web app as well. But again, I guess all I'm trying to say there is to be as efficient as possible and allow your developers to really focus on the value for your business. There are a lot of trusted vendors such as OneSpan, security experts that have these tools available already to help developers really harden their mobile apps and make them more secure. So don't think that you have to approach the security aspects all alone from the beginning. You can definitely get help there. And then I'd turn it over to George for kind of the timeline stuff.
I think one of the, like for this application specifically, like I said, from the moment we've started developing until the moment we deliver the first version, we're talking about around 4 to 6 months, let's say. That being said, the integration with the OneSpan, which basically made a huge difference. I think it's probably the biggest highlight of this application is the fact that, we don't need to chase signers. You don't need to go here and there. And that integration portion, we had one person that was part-time during the 6 months and made it happen. So that was, like I said, one of the reasons why we've chosen them. Like their framework will allow for a lot of flexibility. And I think this is definitely a good choice of partner to actually speed up, let's say, the processes of, getting electronic signature right off the bat.
So, Sam, you guys did a relatively small pilot, got good results, even though you had a very narrow focus of scope, and then you moved into the full-blown thing. Have you got any advice for the people listening where you have to build a business case and kind of show some end payback before you even get the funding to start into this?
And George kind of mentioned this MVP and kind of iterating and really getting those metrics that show that you are making employees more productive and delivering better customer experience to sort of the end users, your customers, and just continuing to kind of build up small successes that then kind of together become sort of the larger than the sum of the parts. I think it's all iterative. I think that's a lot of, I showed those charts before. People are releasing weekly, but smaller releases are a little less risky and a little easier to make secure. So it's really small wins here and there.
So, George, you did a fabulous job of executing on exactly that. So now you've kind of been hellishly successful. Do you still have to justify the next, give people hope at the end of the tunnel here? Do you still have to justify, or are they just kind of all on board now, keep on going to the next thing?
I can say, Elizabeth, that's basically it's a lot easier now to do this. It helped us do a lot of things at BDC, not only starting out this great now program for client apps, and that we'll have to talk to Sam then later about like how do we harden that, like getting some help with them as well. But also this huge program about how we think of data a lot more, and also how we transform our organization to be able to do this sort of agility throughout any different products that we offer, or any different software that we develop inside. So it definitely opened a lot of doors. So I think the key is just like Sam was saying, making sure that you make those numbers visible. They know what the benefits are, and that's on their faces. Like I think everyone in the organization feels pretty proud to work with me. And when you're giving me credit, I will definitely give a lot of the credit to my team that's been working extremely hard to get this done. And I think that's nothing more rewarding than seeing all of the positive effects we had on the entrepreneurs.
Well, cool. Thank you, George. Thank you, Sam, so much. I've learned a lot. It was a very informative session. George, do you have any final words for the people listening?
No, I'd just like to say thank you. First of all, thank you for listening. And I had a great time, and obviously put a lot of hours into this project. But I can say something. It was a very exciting moment of my career, and I do recommend you to push forward and build products that, with that in mind, I think you'll definitely find it as rewarding as we did. And that's about it.
Sam, have you got any final words?
Yeah, just, first of all, thanks so much to George for telling his story. It's, in the same sort of vein, it's very exciting to hear how OneSpan, allowed somebody to go faster and deliver more value more quickly based on some of the tools that we provide. So that's awesome. And then, secondly, I just, if I'm wrapping up sort of the content that I was talking about in terms of the mobile app security aspect specifically, I think it's just important to remember that a great customer experience is also a secure one. Consumers, et cetera, are becoming more aware of security issues. They want to know that developers of the apps that they're using are taking data seriously and protecting that data and hardening those apps so that users don't fall victim to fraud. And then in the end, of course, the organization benefits as well because they are preventing fraud and attacks and that sort of thing on their institution as well.
So thank you again to OneSpan for partnering with IT World on this session. It's been absolutely amazing. For all the attendees, I want to remind you to please complete the online evaluation form. That's how we make sure we give you the best possible opportunities to learn in the future. For everyone who joined us today, thank you. We hope you found the session informative. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and contact ITWC directly. So until next time, thank you very much.